Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are diving into one of the most fascinating and potentially game-changing developments in modern warfare. Ukraine has unveiled a new missile system known as the Flamingo, and many analysts believe it has the potential to dramatically shift the balance on the battlefield. The claim that this missile could send Russia back to the Stone Age might sound like an exaggeration at first, but when we look deeper into the technology, the strategy, and the context, it becomes clearer why so many are paying close attention. The Flamingo missile is not just another projectile. It represents years of innovation, necessity, and determination. Ukraine has been under immense pressure since the beginning of the full-scale invasion in 2022, and its defense industry has had to evolve at lightning speed. The Flamingo is the latest result of that evolution. Unlike older systems that relied heavily on Soviet-era designs, this weapon appears to be homegrown with significant input from Western partners and adapted to modern standards. What makes the Flamingo stand out is its reported versatility. Early reports suggest that it is capable of striking both land and sea targets with high precision. In a conflict where mobility and adaptability are everything, having a weapon that can adjust to multiple scenarios provides a huge advantage. For example, if Russian ships attempt to enforce a blockade in the Black Sea, the Flamingo could be used to neutralize them. If Russian supply lines on the ground become vulnerable, the missile could be repurposed to strike convoys or critical logistics hubs. Another key factor is its range. Ukraine has long sought weapons that allow it to strike deeper behind enemy lines without relying entirely on Western supplies. If the Flamingo truly has the extended range, some insiders are suggesting it could open the door to attacks on infrastructure that Russia thought was untouchable. Imagine a situation where key railroads, fuel depots, or communication centers far beyond the front line suddenly become vulnerable. This doesn't just affect Russia militarily. It impacts their ability to maintain morale and control. Then we have to consider the guidance system. Reports hint that the Flamingo uses advanced targeting technology, possibly incorporating GPS GLONASS and even optical recognition systems. This makes it much harder to jam. Electronic warfare has been one of Russia's strong points in this conflict, and they have successfully disrupted drones and missiles before. But if the Flamingo can resist jamming and still find its target accurately, then Russia loses one of its biggest advantages. In modern warfare, precision is everything, and a missile that can pierce through interference is worth its weight in gold. The missile's warhead is another fascinating element. Unlike traditional heavy payloads, the Flamingo seems to be designed with modular capabilities. That means it can be equipped with different types of warheads depending on the mission. It could carry a high explosive payload for destroying bunkers. It might carry an anti-ship warhead for taking down vessels. It might even carry submunitions for area denial. That level of flexibility means Ukraine can deploy the missile in creative ways, keeping Russia guessing about what each launch actually carries. But beyond the technical specifications, what makes the Flamingo so threatening to Russia is the psychological factor. Every time a new Ukrainian weapon is revealed, it sends shockwaves through Russian strategy circles. Russia is already struggling with stretched supply lines, declining morale, and the constant need to adapt to Western-supplied systems like HIMARS Storm Shadow and ATACMS. Adding another indigenous missile to the mix means that Ukraine is not only dependent on Western supplies, but also developing its own homegrown capabilities. That suggests sustainability for the long term, and that is something Russia fears deeply. The symbolism of the name Flamingo is also worth noting. It's elegant yet dangerous. A flamingo in nature looks graceful, but in this context the missile carries the opposite meaning. It signals that Ukraine is not only defending itself, but also innovating creatively under pressure. Naming weapons has always been part of military culture because it gives them identity and presence. The Flamingo has already captured media attention, and that itself multiplies its power by instilling fear and fascination. The timing of the Flamingo's reveal is also crucial. As the war drags on both sides are looking for breakthroughs, Russia has tried to overwhelm Ukraine with sheer numbers, throwing waves of artillery and manpower into the conflict. Ukraine, on the other hand, has emphasized precision. Every missile and drone strike is calculated to achieve maximum effect with limited resources. The Flamingo fits perfectly into that strategy. A single precise strike can achieve more than dozens of random shells. It represents quality over quantity, and in asymmetric warfare that often decides the outcome. Looking at the broader implications, this missile could alter the naval dynamics in the Black Sea. Russia has long depended on its Black Sea fleet to project power and to threaten Ukraine's ports. If the Flamingo can effectively challenge those ships, then Russia's ability to dominate the sea is greatly reduced. We've already seen how Ukrainian attacks on the fleet in Sevastopol forced Russia to move ships further away. Imagine what happens when a new missile capable of reaching even further comes into play. It could effectively bottle up the fleet and deny Russia free movement. From a geopolitical perspective, the Flamingo also sends a message to Ukraine's allies. It proves that Ukraine is capable of innovating and not merely waiting for external aid. This strengthens its case for continued support because Western governments prefer to back a partner who shows initiative and resilience. Every demonstration of new domestic technology increases Ukraine's credibility on the world stage. It shows that the country is not just surviving, but adapting and building for the future. Critics might argue that one missile cannot change the course of a war. And they are correct in the literal sense. But war is not just about numbers. It is about momentum, perception, and the constant battle of wits. The Flamingo represents a shift in momentum. It tells the world that Ukraine is not running out of ideas or resources. Instead, it is gaining confidence and developing capabilities that even major powers find impressive. That kind of perception can attract more investment, more aid, and more collaboration. Now let's discuss the possible Russian response. Russia will certainly not sit idle while Ukraine unveils a new weapon. They will attempt to study it, intercept it, and develop countermeasures, but that in itself drains resources. For every Ukrainian innovation, Russia has to spend time and money to adapt. This asymmetry keeps Russia on the back foot. Instead of dictating the pace of the war, they are constantly reacting. That weakens their strategic position and makes their planning less effective. The question of production numbers also matters. A missile is only as impactful as its availability. If Ukraine can produce Flamingos in significant numbers, then it becomes a serious threat. Even small-scale production, however, can achieve outsized effects. Limited strikes on high-value targets can paralyze logistics and weaken Russia's ability to maneuver. This is exactly how Ukraine used HIMARS in 2022 to great effect despite limited launchers and missiles. The Flamingo could follow the same pattern, but with the added benefit of being domestically produced. As we analyze further, we cannot ignore the symbolic narrative. Ukraine is often portrayed as the underdog in this war. Each time it reveals a new weapon like the Flamingo, it chips away at that perception. The underdog is turning into an innovator, and that reshapes the global conversation. For Russia, which has long claimed military superiority, this is a bitter pill to swallow. Losing the technological edge undermines its self-image as a great power. That psychological defeat is as damaging as any physical loss on the battlefield. Some reports also suggest that the Flamingo may be designed with stealth features. If true, this would elevate its status even further. A missile that is hard to detect and intercept adds another layer of fear for Russia. Air defense systems can be saturated and overwhelmed. If even a fraction of Flamingos slip through defenses and hit their targets, the damage is severe. And since Russia cannot protect every single installation at once, this creates constant vulnerability. The economic cost to Russia could be enormous. Every time a missile like the Flamingo destroys infrastructure, it forces expensive repairs. It disrupts energy distribution, transportation, and supply chains. These are not just military losses. They ripple through the civilian economy. Factories slow down, railways are delayed, and cities suffer blackouts. Over time, this grinds down Russia's ability to sustain its war effort. In that sense, the Flamingo doesn't just hit targets, it erodes the foundation of Russia's stability. Now let's consider the propaganda impact. Wars are fought not only with weapons, but also with narratives. When Ukraine launches a Flamingo missile and shows the world the results, it becomes a story that spreads far beyond the battlefield. Images of destroyed depots or damaged warships circulate online, boosting Ukrainian morale and undermining Russian confidence. In the information age, perception often matters as much as reality. The Flamingo thus becomes both a weapon and a message. We should also remember that Ukraine's defense industry is interconnected with civilian innovation. Many engineers and scientists who once worked on commercial projects have redirected their skills toward defense. This blending of civilian and military expertise accelerates development. The Flamingo is a product of that environment. It shows how necessity drives innovation and how a nation under siege can still push the boundaries of technology. In that sense, it is not just a missile, but a symbol of national resilience. Looking ahead, we might see the Flamingo integrated into larger strategic frameworks. Imagine it working in coordination with drones providing targeting data. Imagine it being launched in waves alongside decoys to overwhelm defenses. Imagine it being deployed simultaneously with electronic warfare operations to blind radars. The possibilities are vast. Each of these tactics amplifies its effectiveness and makes it more than just a single missile. It becomes part of a wider ecosystem of smart warfare. The Russian military machine has traditionally relied on brute force. Large numbers of tanks, artillery, and soldiers moving in waves. Ukraine, with fewer resources, has been forced to adopt smarter, more flexible approaches. The Flamingo embodies that philosophy. It is the opposite of brute force. It is precise, calculated, and efficient, and in a war of attrition, efficiency can outlast mass. This is why analysts believe the Flamingo could be a game changer. When we think about the phrase sending Russia back to the Stone Age, we understand it's not literal. It's about crippling their ability to function as a modern military power. If their infrastructure is constantly under threat, if their navy is bottled up, if their supply chains are paralyzed, then Russia begins to resemble a giant with clay feet. That is the essence of the claim. The Flamingo could help dismantle the image of invincibility and expose the fragility beneath. The coming months will reveal more about how effective this missile really is. But even now, the very announcement of its existence has already had an impact. Analysts are discussing it, generals are factoring it into their strategies, and Russian officials are no doubt worrying about its implications. That alone proves its importance. In war, sometimes perception precedes reality. The Flamingo has already altered perception, and that is the first step toward altering reality. So what does this mean for the average observer? It means that the war is evolving in unexpected ways. It means that Ukraine is not a passive recipient of aid, but an active innovator. It means that modern conflicts are no longer about who has the most soldiers, but about who has the smartest tools. The Flamingo is one of those tools, and its presence on the battlefield is a sign of how warfare is transforming before our eyes.